ReliaQuest mental performance coaches Dr. Nicole Detling and Derin McMains interview top performers across multiple industries to unpack the strategies and the mindset they use to get the job done. Welcome to No Show Dogs, powered by ReliaQuest. Hey, welcome back to the No Show Dogs podcast. My name is Derin McMains, and today I'm joined alongside a special guest, our co-host, Dave Maddock. Dave is our mental performance consultant in the UK. In today's episode, Dave and I learned from retired professional rugby player Will Fraser. Will had a 10-year career with Saracens. They are London's premier rugby club. He joined the club at the age of 14 and was a part of that illustrious class of 2008, alongside the likes of Owen Farrell and Jamie George. He was a part of the team during their historic 2015 and 16 season when they pulled off the European and Premiership double. Unfortunately, he was forced to retire in 2017 following a neck injury. But Will took what he learned from his successful playing days with the Saracens, and in 2020, he launched 101st, and a year later co-founded the 101st Foundation. 101st transforms organizations by building resilient and cohesive teams by harnessing real-life stories to drive change. So Dave, my man Dave, we've had the weekend to reflect on this conversation that we had with Will. Let's each give our listeners just one takeaway and one thing to listen for right here at the top. Dave, what do you got?
Right, my takeaway is Will talks about being process-driven, not outcome-focused. And I think that's great. I think we probably heard that kind of thing. But I think the way they took it to a step further is they were measuring and quantifying effort around the process in training and on the pitch. They were measuring and quantifying effort, which is normally seen as quite a qualitative thing. And then the listen out for is the acronym TSPDS. I'm not going to spoil it now, but this is kind of the secret sauce of what, and I suppose is really important in moving into a world-class space. Like I see it all over the place, but it turns up again and again, this acronym TSPDS. So listen out for that.
Love it, man. For me, man, my main takeaway was around the power of connection, really. I mean, Will talked a lot about how connection was really a catalyst for the success that his team had. But I'm telling you, I don't think we give connection enough credit. And here's what I mean by that. Like, we were created to be in community, right? Yep. We know this. Belonging and connection are a fundamental human need. And this might seem paradoxical, but we all know this to be true, that individual resilience and individual work ethic increases when we're connected to others, right? I push through adversity. I bounce forward from setbacks. I work harder when I'm connected to the people on my team. Like, research supports this idea, and listeners, this is nothing new. We know that you know this to be true as well. Look, and I would take it just maybe a step further, and when I would say, like, and it's not just connection to each other. Yeah. Overall, I really think it's 3 connection points that people need to produce their best work. 1, obviously, what we already just mentioned, connection to others. 2 is connection to something bigger than themselves, right? Someone called this purpose. And I would say it's connecting and understanding that the larger impact of their work to either the organization as a whole or just the greater good of society. And the third thing is connection to the team's short-term mission, right? Yeah. Like, I understand how my individual output impacts my team's chances of hitting our clearly defined goals, right? And I do think, actually, Dave, I don't know what you think, but I do think there's an order to those 3, but that order it's kind of different for everyone, right? Some might value a little bit more purpose more than others, right? But it's like, but that's, I think, leadership. That's your job, right? Is to figure out, which one of those connection points is most important, and then lean into those. So anyway, that was my big takeaway. And here's one thing to listen for. Really listen for how Will differentiates between a skill error, an effort error, and a knowledge error, and who's responsible for those errors.
Yeah, that was gold. Yeah.
All right, man. Let's check out this interview with Will Fraser. Hey, Will, welcome to No Show Dogs, man. Glad you're here.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
All right, man. Let's, like, the rugby squad you're a part of, special group, man. Special group. Can't wait to find out about the journey and how you guys got there. But just to give people a little context, like your squad won 6 premiership trophies and 3 European Cups. You guys did the doubles twice. Now, I know our American listeners are like, what the heck is that? So if you kind of just shed a little light on what that means for the squad that you were a part of, but also kind of, if you can, if it's even possible, we tried to figure this out before we came on air, But what does that mean kind of on the state side of things?
Yeah, so I suppose our Premiership titles is the domestic league. So in soccer, it's the Premier League. English is Premiership Rugby. So I suppose the equivalent would be the NFL or the NBA, right? So it's
Gotcha.
you're the best in your country, and then the European Cup kind of does what it says in the tin. It's then a European competition where you're playing against teams from France, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Italy, and over here in the UK, those competitions run side by side. So the Premiership will run throughout the entirety of the season, and then you'll have kind of these European weekends where you then dip into that competition. So essentially, you're the same squad, the same group of players is playing in both competitions. So doing double score, right? And in terms of trying to equate it across the pond, I suppose we kind of figured out it was like winning the NFL, but then your NFL team also playing in a European league at the same time, or European competition at the same time, and winning that one in the same season. I suppose it's kind of the double.
Wow. Got it. So it would be equivalent to like winning 6 Super Bowls, and the doubles would be winning the Super Bowl and in the same year heading over to Europe and beating everybody in football as well, winning that league.
If we were gonna try and equate it as closely as possible, I'd say that's probably the closest we're gonna get.
Yeah. I love it, man. I love it. Well, when I hear that, I'm like, incredible. So walk us through the journey to get there, because nobody falls on the mountaintop, right? No team falls on the mountaintop. It's intentional. It's a climb. It's a slog. There's a ton of tough decisions that have to be made. So you just kind of walk us through your experience with the club, like where you guys started and then how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. This didn't just happen. To use your word, it was incredibly intentional. So I joined the club, again, different over here to the States. In the States, your route to professional sport is through the college system and then the drafts and kind of that route. Over here in the UK, at kind of teenage, so in rugby, it was kind of 13, 14 years old, you essentially get dumped into your local professional team's academy system. So whilst you're at school, you're doing your education, and kind of Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, you're going to do your academy training sessions. And then when you hit 18, it's essentially up to the club whether they give you a full-time contract or they let you go. So I was very fortunate to leave school at 18 and go straight into professional rugby. And when I kind of came through, Saracens were the ultimate underachievers. So we'd gone down kind of the money route, and by our owner at the time, by his own admission, he tried everything to try and turn the club around. So we were that club that signed some of the biggest names in world rugby at the time, and had nothing to show for it from an actual success and performance point of view. And no one quite figured out why it was. And in 2009, we had a guy called Brendan Venter that came to the club. So Brendan won the World Cup with South Africa back in '95. Came over, and he still is, I think, a practicing doctor. So the whole time he was coaching us in England, he had a practice running back in South Africa. He was a practicing doctor the whole time. And I've got this audio clip somewhere or other, but there's this clip of him talking. And when he came in, he said, well, most of the patients he sees in this practice that are ill, a lot of the source of origin of their illness is actually because they're fundamentally unhappy people. So it's almost, if you can figure out kind of that side of life, then actually we can mitigate against illnesses and falling and becoming unwell. So he said, when you look at rugby and performance, it's the same, right? If we don't have people that are fundamentally happy and enjoying what they're doing, how can we expect the certain levels of performance out of them that we're trying to get? So he came into it very much with that holistic way of thinking. But then how that manifests itself was kind of the antithesis of it, because he came in and it's now called Black Monday. So it's this Monday where he basically sat in his new office at the training ground, and the whole squad, I wasn't there, myself and Jackson Ray, who's a good friend of mine. Now he's the one you really should be talking to, because he actually is a club legend. We were in South Africa at the time because we were playing some rugby out there for the club, but the whole squad lined up against the wall like this into his office, and they came out 5 minutes later with a thumbs up or thumbs down. I'm staying or I'm going, irrespective of contracts, irrespective of anything else. So on that Black Monday, 14 players lost their job in one day. 14.
So how many players are on a squad?
In a squad, an entire squad, you've got, it varies, but you're probably looking between, I'll say 40 and 50. So you're looking at a decent chunk of the squad. And we're talking international players. Guys have been in the club most of their lives. You're looking at some of the best players in the league, the highest paid players, that Brendan just kind of went bang. And again, he talks about it retrospectively in that they weren't bad players, they weren't bad people, they just weren't going to fit in to the project, right, into what Brendan wanted to do. So, and then the people he brought in at the time were the opposite, like were kind of relatively unknown in the world of rugby. They became very well known off the back of their time at the club because they were some of the best players to ever come and play in our league. But it was this whole premise of actually, can we just get the right people in the room? So irrespective, and Brendan spoke a lot to us as players around, as a coach, by definition, it's their job to make us better rugby players. Right? It's that is their job role. If their job description on a thing is we need to upskill them in what we're trying to do. But it's very difficult for someone to make someone a better person. So actually, can we get the right people in the room at ground zero, for want of a better phrase? Yeah. And then it's up to the coaches then to turn us into a good rugby team in terms of competency, being able to tackle, being able to pass, all those sorts of things. And so that was where it all started, really. And we kind of went this journey, and Brendan was one of these people. He actually was only at the club full time for 18 months. And then the project kind of handed over to Mark McCall, who's been at the helm now for the subsequent 16 years. And it was always this, Brendan's kind of that you would follow him into a blazing fire. One of these people that when he's especially as young, kind of 18, 19-year-olds listening there. But he was very good because the way he got the messaging across was he basically allowed everyone to just go at him. So you had players there, you also got to remember this dynamic. You had guys there whose best friends had been sacked completely out of the blue, who all of a sudden have lost their jobs, all the consequences of that. So Brendan just allowed them all to come at him. We used to have these team meetings in Brendan's first pre-season that went on for like 2-3 hours. So it was just senior players just going at Brendan. Why does this make any sense? What I do? Why make all this? But in doing so, what he's allowing everyone to say their opinion, right? To be heard, to be listened to be valued. And off the back of that, you can then have a real conversation. Because if you're having a conversation without that person saying their bit, then they're holding on to it the entire time, right? They'll nod along, say yes, and then they'll sabotage because they've got these thoughts and these things they've not been able to actually have a conversation about. So that was where Brendan had this stroke of genius. He was just a very personable guy. And then that was the foundation of, everything that followed. And then we went down this route of you can't have a really complex rugby system at the same time when you're fundamentally changing the culture of the club. So what they did, from a rugby point of view, just scrap the whole thing. They said, we don't care about winning. Like, we don't care. All our eggs are in the people basket. So from a rugby point of view, we are going like as Billy basic as you could ever imagine. And it was the most boring rugby you would ever... Our own fans used to boo us. Like, it was so dull and so boring and so basic and so simple because the whole thing was, let's build this other side first. Because if we get that side right, then we can layer the rugby on top of it. Ironically, we went from finishing second bottom the year kind of Brendan took over. Sorry, the year at the end of the year, Brendan then took over subsequently. And Brendan's first year, we made the final for the first time ever.
Wow.
Playing this really dull rugby, playing this incredibly boring.
But it's basics. It's do the basics brilliantly.
I think it's and I don't think even Brendan expected us to kind of it to happen that quickly. But I think it was this mix of, and I suppose if we're taking this into the people listening in the corporate world and in businesses, it's this kind of concept of opportunity cost, right? Yeah. So what's the opportunity cost if we don't focus on people? If we don't fundamentally change our outlook and how we feel and how we think about each other and our levels of connection, understanding, what's the opportunity? So, but in order to do that, that's going to take time, right? So there's no way we can do both. We can have a really complex way of playing rugby at the same time as doing this, because one is going to have to be compromised.
And the smart thing, sounds like what Brendan did, is he gave people a voice in there. It wasn't like, right, this is the highway, this is my real highway, and you lot don't fit in, so you're out. But then it was, right, we're in a team, we're selected in, and I think it's a ReliaQuest to talk about attitude, energy, effort a lot, and very much as a focus on people and the quality and attitude, energy, effort of our people. And it sounds like that's what people recruited for.
Yeah.
And then it was get some cohesion in the team, give people a voice.
Absolutely.
And things can turn around quickly.
Yeah. And so I suppose a nice analogy of how that manifests itself in terms of as a player. So as a player, the only metric we were given that we were going to be judged on was how hard we worked. That was it. Now, there's a number of ways they tracked how hard we worked, but it was entirely that. It didn't matter whether I could wing a 50-yard pass to the side. It didn't matter if I could kick them out of anything. It's just, am I going to work hard? And actually, we had a lot of players that a lot of pundits and commentators couldn't understand why one player was being picked over another, because on paper the other player had more experience or was more skillful, whatever it was. But the player that was picked, that's the player that's just going to run up and down that pitch for 80 minutes non-stop, right? Because that's what we needed. That was the thing that was valued in our club, was how hard we had this phrase TSPDS, and I won't use one of the words because it is an expletive. And I was prepped before the call to not swear, but it's the stuff people don't see. So that was our biggest metric. So when we had the prizes were like chocolate bars and gimmicky little toys, but that was the thing we rewarded. It's not the person that scored the try; it's the person that hit 3 rucks in a row to give us quick ball that allowed us to shift to the winger, for the winger to then make the most of an opportunity that presents itself. But no one else saw that guy hit 3 rucks, and that guy's not hitting those rucks to win the award. He's hitting them because he knows if I hit these rucks, then it's going to help the team. We're going to make the most of an opportunity that's going to present itself. And that was the thing. So the commentators don't see it, the fans in the stadium don't see it. Even as another player on the pitch, I probably won't see it. But when the coaches review the games, that's the stuff they're pulling out, because that's the stuff that makes a difference.
Effort sometimes we view as it's purely qualitative. And it's like, I can't put a 0 or 1 to that. But it sounds like that's what was happening. It was like you would judge it. Effort was judged on quantitative metrics, like I think you said previously, like how many meters you've run in the game, and how many blocks you hit, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, it's the things people aren't seeing.
Yeah.
There was another phrase you've used multiple times, and I might have stolen a little bit a few times: discretionary effort. Talk us through that. I love that, the stuff people don't see.
Yeah.
And that aligns kind of neatly with this phrase, like discretionary effort.
Yeah. So it's kind of what we've been built on, and I think when you look in any, and I use inverted commas, any high performing organisation or team in any industry, sport, corporate, whatever it is, when you look at the ones that are really at that top level, the reason they're there first and foremost is because there's more people in that team that are willing to do more for less. So from the point of view of, they're willing to pull that extra shift, to run that extra yard, where it might be for no recognition, for no reward, purely because they know it's going to help the team and it's going to help the thing we're trying to get after, whether that be winning a match, whether that be winning a sale, or whatever it might be. And that ties into kind of the work ethic, and one of our values at club is and was work rate. So it was something we kind of put right on a pedestal, but that doesn't just happen. You're not going to run an extra yard for someone that you're not connected to and you don't get on with or you don't understand. And I think this is the point, is that the reason we went in this people bucket, and we did loads of cool stuff that you would never ever be allowed to do nowadays because of the restrictions on the league and how you can spend your money. We did some epic trips and just some amazing time spent together. And again, we got hammered for it in the press, because in between 2 massive games, they send us away on a 3-day bender. And the whole league were like, the club we were playing on the way back was like, you're taking the mick, like you're showing us no respect. And so no, this, in the nicest way, this has square root of naffle to do with you. This is for us, right? We're trying to understand each other and trying to build this thing. And it's in those connections that then completely subconsciously and subliminally, you do stuff for each other without even thinking about it, that you perhaps wouldn't do for someone. So when the work we do now, or I do now with corporate clients, it's kind of saying, if I come into a room full of people and I ask you to do something today, that means you're going to leave work 2 hours later, you're going to miss the kids' bedtime, you're going to miss X, Y, and Z, you'll tell me to do one. Because you just met me, you don't know who is this English dude coming in here telling us, like. But if a family member or a friend asks you to do the exact same thing, there's a very high chance you do it. Now, the only difference is the connection relationship you have with them compared to the connection relationship you have with me, and the understanding of the intention by which they're asking you to do this thing. And that's the whole point. Actually, in a team context, if we don't have that level of understanding, it doesn't have to mean we like each other, by the way. It's understanding. If we have that level of understanding and connection, we understand the intent by which things are being said. We can then openly kind of challenge back. And we're not guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed.
Phrase I like to use here: emotional resonance. You have a resonance that you might not all be like best mates, but you understand each other. There's probably a healthy friction, right? Because imagine in a squad of 40, there's probably 2 or 3 other people who could play your position. So there's
100%.
And so it's like, but you're still mates with them, but it's health competition, and you have that resonance. And I think going back to what Brendan seems to have built well is, one, he's leading. And I think we're not going to talk about leadership and management now, but ultimately, then he's a very good example here of Brennan's set an example of leadership over management.
Mm.
And there's a subtle difference that we can debate in another podcast. But it's the building that emotional resonance. For me, when I look at that, that's what leaders do. They're building that resonance in between them and the team, but also amongst the team.
Yeah. But to your point earlier, the thing that he struck gold on was he kind of gave us this framework, but then entirely allowed us to figure out, well, what does that mean to us? Because we're the ones that are going to have to do it and live it. So the amount of meetings, team meetings that we didn't talk about rugby once, it was, how are you going to take this idea forward? It's like the values and how we wanted to operate. We were the ones that decided that within the framework, that we were kind of given. And that then gives us the connection to what we're trying to do. And I think often, and you guys will see it more than I do, but that's where you see the biggest disconnect often in organizations, is people are just told, this is what you're doing, this is how I want you to do it, off you pop, without allowing a conversation or that time to connect to what it is. So then that person goes, hang on, you have no idea what that means in my world. I don't know what that looks like on the ground, on the shop floor and all this, that, and the other. So you immediately create this underlying level of disengagement from what you're trying to do, and this kind of subliminal sabotage, And
it's a why. There's a why which is unanswered when things are dictated. The why is kind of given to you, whereas what Brendan's done here is said, hey, well, what's the why is you want to win. We want to do things differently. We want to win stuff. You've got, let's go, own this.
And by the way, on that Black Monday, some of the players that he wanted to get rid of, they turned around and said, well, legally, no, you're not allowed to, because I've still got another 2 years left of my contract. So I'm going to stay and I'm going to prove you wrong. And we had one guy called Michael Owen, who played for the British and Irish Lions, Welsh captain, amazing bloke. I think was one of them. And I think he started nearly every single game in Brendan's first year.
Right.
So it's that level of humility as well from Brendan, to go, actually, fair play to you type thing. So he had, and that's the thing with and I think any good, okay, we're not talking about leadership, but I think any team dynamic, right? Then a conversation by definition can only be a conversation if it's both ways. Otherwise, it's a monologue. Actually allowing conversations to take place and to be meaningful and to have kind of an outcome at the end of it, like that was in retrospectively a huge reason why I think the group took it and ran with it in the way they did.
And I would just, for listeners, I would pick up on, there's a difference between having a leadership Q&A or an Ask Me Anything session and people actually feeling like they're heard and seeing differences as a result of the things they're saying. And so that goes back to that emotional resonance piece.
Yeah.
So a story from in my military career, I worked for a brigadier, and when I joined battalion, we were doing one of these get to know each other drinking sessions, and this brigadier was there, and I was the new guy in, and I was in a bit worse for wears. Anyway, this brigadier saw me worse for wears. 6 months later, when we were in Afghanistan, he walked up to me in the middle of this kind of operation with the Afghan army. Like, oh, David, have we sobered up now? And we have a bit of a giggle, and then, but it's like that immediately. One, knew my name. Two, built some connection, a little bit of humor around it. 100%. And he's this super senior guy that why does he even know my name? But even it's that kind of emotional resonance.
100%.
No Show Dogs is brought to you by ReliaQuest, a global leader in cybersecurity. ReliaQuest helps enterprise cybersecurity teams contain threats in minutes with its AI-powered security operations platform, Gray Matter. ReliaQuest makes security possible for the most trusted enterprise brands in the world. Learn more at ReliaQuest.com. You know what I love, Will, and I kind of want to go back to it a little bit. First, I just want to highlight some things. One, the only metric that you guys measured was how hard you worked. Right, was effort essentially, which I think is brilliant in and of itself. But also kind of go back to Black Monday on, it started with getting the right people, right? Getting the right people on the team and moving some other folks around, obviously removing the ones that didn't fit that. But one thing that you said that I want to kind of unpack a little bit, you said the coach's job, the leader's job, their job was to make you all better rugby players. That's it, right? You didn't mention winning. Right, which I thought was interesting, right? Because I think a lot of times, like, my job here is to win, and I love how they went kind of upstream of that and said, "Hey, our job is to make them better players." So, in making you all better players, what did they own, like in their coaching? Like what did they own, and then what did you as a player, as a rugby player, what did you all own in your path to the Premiership and the European Cup?
Yeah, so Brendan had this one phrase that he hammered home, was about being process driven, not outcome focused. So I think in the past it was all exactly to your point. You go in first day of pre-season, we want to win the Premiership. And the problem is that's such an intangible. In the first day of pre-season, that's 9 months away. It's so intangible. You have no idea what it looks like. So your focus is constantly at that end goal, and as a result of that, you kind of miss what's right in front of you, and the hurdles and the challenges on the way. So that was the first one. The second one, just to reference, we measured the hard work. That there was an element of qualitativeness to that, in the sense of someone could have run the most meters, but if they're just running aimlessly around the pitch, it's useless to everyone, right? So there's an element of kind of putting it in context. So in terms of what we owned early on, and again, the thing is, a lot of what I'm talking about now it was the early days, what we now call, for those of us that went through it, kind of the revolution. We kind of called it the revolution internally. And then the thing is, what's difficult is, as you then get success and you win titles, you win trophies, expectations change, perceptions change. What's hard is holding on to that, but equally some things you have to let go because it's just fundamentally a different place now. So now a lot of those early days still remains, but it looks slightly different because it's a different group of people and this club's at a different stage. But in terms of early on and getting us that buy-in, so what Brendan, we had numerous sessions on it. This clarity between skill error and effort error. So skill error, which is completely like this blew our minds when Brendan said this to us, and I think we all thought we suddenly had a free ride for the next 2 years or whatever it was. He said, if we make a mistake on the pitch, so if I miss a tackle, if I drop a ball, whatever it might be, if I make a skill error, that was not my fault. So me dropping the ball is not my fault, which sounds a bit bizarre. He says it's our fault as coaches because we've not coached you well enough to be able to execute that skill under pressure. So that's what we own. They say we'll look after that side of it. We'll do the upskilling. As a player, all we need you to do is work hard, right? So it's the effort. So any effort error. So if you don't get off the floor, so they can time how quick you get off the floor, your meters per second, all these sorts of things. So if you don't get off the floor quick enough, if you don't chase a kick hard enough, if you don't work back into position fast enough, that's you. That's entirely on you. And it was this concept, and it was actually a former British National Lions captain called Paul O'Connell, Ireland captain. And there's this very famous clip on one of the Lions tours of basically, and it's the same concept, the same. He said, for us to win this tour, we need to be the best in the world at everything that requires no talent and no skill. So chasing a kick, there's no talent needed to chase a kick. There's no skill required to get off the floor. That's entirely a mentality, right? It's a desire and a willingness to do that. And then you tap back into, well, what is my desire to do that? My desire to do that is because if I do it, I help the team. It doesn't help me. It helps the team. So you kind of, it all kind of intersects. But yeah, so that was it. So, and to be fair, if you made an effort error, they came down on you big time. And the squad did.
That's massive, right? Because it's your self-policing. There's a standard, and that we talk about standards a lot in our performance. Our definition of performance is the standard everyone accepts.
100%.
So if your mate, who your best mates with, doesn't accept that standard, you're like, flip, I will do better next time.
It was the biggest insult you could give to someone, was saying you're not working hard enough. Far and away. It was right, like a dagger in your heart, because that was what we pride ourselves on, right? And it was a thing, in training, if someone doesn't cut the line on a fitness drill, or if someone doesn't take it, that's but effort also comes into, so we also had knowledge errors. So for example, in sport, same in business, whether it's the sales manual or whatever it might be, there's an element of knowledge required to do your job. So our knowledge was learning what we called our maps. So essentially our plays, where we need to be, things like line out. So rugby, there's a lot of complexity as a sport. There's a lot of calls. There's a lot of things you need to know. So in a line out, is the ball goes off the sideline. It's the way in which we restart a play where the two teams line up and someone throws it in, and there's loads of moving around. But in a line out, at any one point, you have at least 5 different calls. So I'm there in a line out, and I've got 5 different calls that could happen. I'm listening for our caller to which one he calls, and that movement then starts off certain trigger points. It's incredibly way more complex than people realise. But if you don't know, that's the effort. For me, if I don't know that, if I get that wrong, that's not a skill error, that's an effort error, because I've not spent the time to go and have the relevant conversations I need to have, to go through the plays on the computer, to look at the videotapes, to look at that. So yes, working hard, what we think about is that physical running up and down a pitch, but working hard is also knowing your knowledge. It's having that. So, and that was the thing that took me a long time as a young player coming through, of really kind of get my head around. And I remember the year we won the double actually in 2016. We played the quarterfinal, and I had probably one of my worst games ever. Like I had an absolute stinker, and head coach kind of pulled me in, and this is Mark McCall, took over from Brendan, and Mark was brilliant. He's an incredibly decent guy, and he pulled me in and gave me the security of saying I'm going to play in the semi-final, so don't worry about kind of the game. That's a one-off. But he said what I need from you is all I need is you to know your knowledge. Just know your knowledge. I don't need anything else. Just know where you need to be, what you need to do, because if you know that, you don't have to think when you're on the pitch. And this sounds bizarre, but you're at your worst when you're thinking on the pitch. Right? It just needs to be second nature. You know where you're going, you know what to do, just go, and then you can do you. Then you can go and smoke people, then you can go and turn the ball over, because it just becomes natural. And so he really hammered that, knowing your knowledge, and that was it. So I just knew it all. And that's to your point, Dave, in terms of competition for places. So that's where what the club were able to breed is this, sounds a bit wishy-washy, but kind of this collaboration over competition. So we're all fighting for the shirt, of course we are. But whoever gets the shirt, it's then, well, what can I do to help him? Because if I help him, it helps the team. If it helps the team, we all benefit. Even if I'm not the one playing. So often in a training week, they say the most important people this week is the people that aren't playing. Because it's your job to make sure the lads that are playing are as well drilled, are as well rehearsed as they possibly can be. And that's on our job as kind of what we used to call the non-23. The squad that are playing on the weekend. And it's also a way of them buying everyone in, right? So you don't get this disparity between the lads that play and the lads that aren't, because everyone's still playing towards that same end goal. Okay, how can we help? Since the lads win, they put off a play in the match. You go, oh, cool, yeah. I remember them doing that in training.
Yeah.
We actually stopped them in training do that, so we were technically better than the team there. But
Yeah.
but yeah. So you get all these, and it's funny because I don't think any of us probably appreciated it in the moment. So when we're going through like the intention and the purposefulness and the deliberate nature by which everything was kind of put on for us, it's only when you finish and you retrospectively look back and you go, wow, does it actually all make sense? How funny, it was almost like it was designed. Yeah.
There was something we taught in one of our pre-chats. We spoke about layers of expectation and how initially, like you said, there was like the basic expectation is we're just going to do basic rugby.
Yeah.
And then you were going to build up to then you're going to start running some tactics and plays. Can you talk us through how that worked out?
Yeah.
And
so
as expectations changed, as you started to win games and titles.
Yeah. So in terms of so as I say, it was. I won't bore the listeners with the detail of it, because even that will literally bore you. But it was pretty basic. So we did that, but then we built this kind of foundational framework for how we want to play the game. So then the following year, it was almost like year by year, we just incrementally just added new elements into it. So from attack and defense, we added maybe more plays, or we added different systems. And then it got to a point, we'd won a couple premierships, and then they got to a point where there was fundamental changes then of actually going, well, this now is too basic for what we're trying to do. So we're going to add in these complexities or these movements, whatever it might be. But then it got to a point where actually the first few years, it was very prescriptive. It was very tailored, and the other team would know exactly what we're doing and when we're doing it. Like, it was that obvious. But it's the fact that we could still do it well, even if you knew it, we could still execute it well enough that we could still manipulate the other team to open holes, this and the other. And for as a player, it's difficult because we had, again, this concept of going to your old days, Dave, the generals and the soldiers. So our generals on the pitch was kind of your fly half, scrum half, your number 8. The rest of us were soldiers. So the premise was soldiers do not think. Just listen to the general and do what the general's saying. Trust them to put us in the right positions. You just go and work. Just go work. That then kind of, we became a good enough team where then actually we needed everyone to be able to have an element of their own decision making, and to be able to actually, if there's a hole and there's an opportunity, usually we kick it here, but actually we've got a 5-on-2 overlap. I just need to pass it. Whereas typically, so then we start looking at actually it's a structure. And so by definition, a structure and a framework, you can operate within that. As long as it's within the framework and within the structure, we can make our own decisions. And so we then had kind of a new lease of life, because all of a sudden we had I very much always remained a soldier. I didn't, as I said, I didn't really think. I just did, and I let everyone else do the cool stuff. But those that could then had actually the responsibility and the opportunity to actually make their own decision, right? So it's kind of saying we knew we would kick, but I can hear someone saying we're on out wide. Let's give it a go. Let's chance it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then we can come back and review it and go from there. So every year that incrementally, and then what you got was this situation where I think we had, behind all of this, the club brought loads of us kids through the system as well. So the whole thing was, whilst you're layering this people, you're layering the complexity of the rugby, Saracens typically was this massive turnover of staff, this turnover of players. So behind it all was the club trying to create an element of stability within the coaching staff, within the playing group. So you had this constant conveyor belt of academy kids coming up through the system. So our coaching staff now, so like literally this season's just finished, only 2 people in the last 16 years have been brought in from the outside in 16 years. Like it's amazing. And so you had this thing. So in the European final in 2016, of the 15 players on the pitch at the final whistle, 11 had come through the academy system. So what you do is you then have this ingrained understanding of what the system is, culturally, who we are, how we operate, and so you had that kind of underpinning everything else, this kind of element of stability in people and stability in process and all these sorts of things. And we had this amazing, 10-year stretch where we were able to do incredible things on the pitch and, create some of the best players in the world. And off the pitch, we were able to have an amazing time together. And I was only with some of the boys only last night. The couple have finished, one's still going, coming towards the end. And we were actually having a very similar conversation to this, funnily enough, just kind of reminiscing and go, how amazing, because rugby is different now. Just there's a lot of the economics of it. It's just, you can never do now what happened when we were playing, just purely from a financial point of view. But we were just like, wow, we played in an amazing era.
I know we're getting up against it. And before we get to the final question, though, and this might be oversimplifying, you tell me, Will, but I almost feel like when I think about Saracen's success, where it kind of started, it was get the hardest workers in the room and make sure they're all connected.
Yeah.
And let them go.
Pretty much.
Right? I mean, there's obviously more to it, but it's like,
well, early on, that was it. That wasn't far,
right?
From it. Yeah.
Wow. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then I love you shared that story around how simple the system you ran was early on. And the expectation was like, we're probably not going to be very good early on, but you had the right people in the room. They were all connected. And then you look up and there you are in the final, right away.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating, man. Thank you. And I'm telling you, and I think we've all experienced this, and I've seen it in other sports as well, but just the power of people being connected and the power of just hard work. Like when you combine those two things, it's like the flywheel gets going, and then watch out and you just,
absolutely,
it's amazing where you end up.
And the thing with sport, what's obviously incredibly unique about sport and particularly professional sport is the nature of the thing you're doing is the thing that connects you. And I think the big difference when you go into the corporate world is that the thing that people do often isn't the thing that connects them, in the sense of to become a professional sports person. Not everyone. Some get there because they might not actually enjoy the sport that much. They just happen to be very, very good at it. But most people get there because there's an inherent kind of passion and love for what you're doing. The real world doesn't work like that. Some people are, but a lot of people aren't in the job they're in because they love data processing. And God, I'm passionate about compliance and procurement. Like that's just not the real world.
We love you compliance people.
Sorry. Yeah. I'm making a general assumption here. I'm sure all you compliance people love it. But the point I'm making is then, well, then how do we find the connection for each other? If the connection of what we do isn't the thing that connects us, what is the thing that connects us? And so it's then going that one step back and going, well, how do we find that connection? And a lot of that is just the understanding of, so it's amazing how little we have conversations about why we're doing the job we're doing. Motivation is a fascinating one. So if you think about my time in professional sport, my motivation changed numerous times during my professional rugby career. So when I started, my only motivation was to get an academy contract. Once I got that, it's then going to first team contract. Once I got that, it's becoming a core of the first team. Once I got that, it's trying to play for England. Once that didn't work, it's then going, how can I maximize my career for end of rugby, this and the other, right? So it changes. And because your motivation changes, how you interact with the sport changes, how you interact with other people changes, how you view the world changes. And the same is true in work. But we have the conversation once, which is usually in the interview. And then once they're on, we never have it again. But it's so integral to how we interact with people. And that's the thing that connects us, right? So if we understand, and really in life, I think, and this is like the ultimate generalization. So anyone listening, feel free to kneecap me as I say it. But there's three main reasons why people are in the job they're in, right? One is because they love the job. Two is because it's a stepping stone onto something else. Three is because it pays the bills. Yeah, you can loosely kind of put most people, if not everyone, into one of those three buckets. Now, ideally, if you're a CEO, founder of a business, a team leader, whatever it is, you want everyone to be in bucket number one, but that's not going to happen. So how do we get people to have that level of connection to what they're doing, even though they hate their job? Well, actually, they hate their job, but they could understand and connect with the people that they're doing it with. If I connect and understand the people that I'm doing it with, it means that actually I want to do my job a bit better because I know it's going to impact them if I don't. It could be connection and understanding as to, well, how does this really crappy job I do, how does that play into the bigger picture? What value does it give into the end product of what we're trying to achieve as an organization? And by understanding that gives me connection to the whole bit, that I might not enjoy it, but actually it's an integral part of this. So it's how that step back, how do we find that level of, and to the point we made, it's not, the starting point and the origin is not liking each other. This sounds really bizarre. If we go into an interaction trying to get someone to like, if I'm trying to get you to like me, most of what I say is going to be complete garbage, because I'm going to play into what you like and then pretend I like it so that you like me. Right? That's not, and that's quite toxic, and that's only goes.
People pick up on it, right? There's no authenticity.
You can, I'm not going to say the words, but you can smell BS from a mile away. It's, and so what we're trying to do is understanding how well can we understand. And if we're going in trying to grow the depth of our understanding, we're human beings. Inherently, the result of that is we're probably going to like each other and we're probably going to get on. But it's the understanding is what we're going in for. Because actually, if we're in a situation where I think you really like me, so I'm coming in the morning and going, oh, D-Mac, Dave, how are you boys? Blah, blah, blah. And you're both in your head going, oh my God, here he comes. Like, leave me alone. I've got work to do. Just, we get nothing from the conversation. If I'm generally trying to ask you a real question, you're not going to give me a proper answer because you're just trying to give me the answer. That means I'd leave as soon as possible. Right. But if we're in a situation, we go the understanding where I know that we don't get along like how I thought we did, my interaction completely changes. I don't come in with the highs and the high fives. It's like, D-Mac, Dave, I've got this problem. I've got this issue. Can you help me figure it out? And then and that is a much more productive relationship and conversation than the former. And again, it's because we're trying to grow that understanding. And then that extrapolates, right? And compounds across teams, across groups.
And I think structuring and managing relationships or fostering that kind of space it's a strategic effort. I think it actually takes a lot of thought to do that, across a business.
Yeah. It's like physical training, Dave. I mean, you run with blooming sandbags on your back every week, so it's, and this is our team psych, Dave Jones, who does a lot of work with us in the capacity now. And he'd always said to us, he said, building this connection, understanding, relationships is the exact same as physical training. If you want to get stronger, you go to the gym more. If you want to be quicker, you go and do some running drills. The second you stop going to the gym, you become weaker. The second you stop doing your running drills, you become slower. If you want to build connection, build relationships, and build understanding, you have to train it. You have to dedicate and allocate time, space, and permission for people to have those conversations. The second you stop having those conversations, it regresses. But coming again full circle, to have those conversations, you have to not do something else.
We have to fund it as well, and that's time and money.
This is it, time, money. To have this conversation, I'm not sending that email. I'm not going to that meeting. So what it comes down to, and this is quite deep. This might be a nice point, D-Mac. I can kind of mic drop and you can do the final bit. But it comes down. It's a philosophical choice, and it has to be a philosophical choice, because if it's not, we'll go down this route. The second we come to a challenge or a hurdle, this is the thing that gets parked, because that's more important. When actually, in order to get through that hurdle and get over that challenge, we have got to double down on all this stuff, because the only way we do it is if we improve our problem solving capacity, which is improving our understanding, which is all the stuff we've fundamentally kind of spoken about. So it's our people, and the reason for this, are people prepared to prioritize it as much as they say they want to prioritize it. That's the thing. Because this whole thing becomes one big BS production, because people would always say yes, always nod along, go along with it. And then reality hits and it's the first thing that gets parked.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dave, before you ask the final question, I'll just highlight this, that idea of like, how do you improve or how do you increase your problem solving capacity, right? Well, that's done through collaboration, right? When you have a great team around you, you can collaborate. Well, how do you increase collaboration? And one thing I say all the time, Dave probably gets tired of me saying it, but I say, like, you don't increase collaboration by focusing on collaboration. You increase collaboration by focusing on connection.
Yes.
Because it's connection that increases collaboration, because you only collaborate with people that you're connected with.
100%.
Right. And so anyway, just
100%.
Thank you for highlighting that, man. Yeah. Great point.
No problem.
So we ask everyone who comes on No Show Dogs this question, Will. And so this is a question to you, Will. It's not a question to perhaps your time in the team or perhaps corporate head on, but it's and I love it because it's a great question. It gets into the root of things. But what were some of the things that you were willing to do that others weren't, that has helped you have success up to this point?
Particularly when I finished playing, was embrace my ignorance. That sounds like, so when leaving and starting a business, starting doing the things I'm doing now, I went into all of that so blind. Like, I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but it was that like blissful ignorance of going, I know I don't know, but I know I've got enough people around me who I can go to for help. And I think really playing into that ignorance, and actually that ignorance being the thing that's enabled us to do what we're doing, because we've been able to question kind of how other people operate in the industry. And even when we talk to clients, be able to genuinely, objectively say, well, what makes you think that? And what makes you do that? And that, so I think since I finished 100% starting businesses and being involved with other organizations, that playing in and actually really trying to hold on to that ignorance to a certain degree, I think is certainly something that I don't know. I don't know if other people do that or not, but I'd say I haven't heard anyone else kind of talk about it. In terms of my playing career, I mean, it's probably going to, underscore this whole conversation now, but I was part of an incredibly successful team. I myself didn't have that successful of a career, but I suppose one thing I did a lot of that not many other people did was I came back from injury a lot, which also meant I got injured a lot. So you can kind of both sides of that double-edged sword. But I think I like anyone that plays the sport, particularly rugby, I had this just very deep connection and love for what I did, but actually more so for the people I did it with. I can, and we've had a few beers together, Dave, and a good old deep, meaningful conversation. But I get, when I'm in, I can get very deep in my relationships and connect to people, and people mean a lot to me. And I think the reason every time I wanted to come back, in many ways, the rugby came second. It was actually like, I just want to be back on the pitch with you, with the boys. And I want to, like, I had a lot of other personal stuff with my brother, had an accident, this and the other, where the club kind of really were incredible to me and my family. And so I think the one thing I had as leverage, almost in many ways, that other players didn't have, was that sense of wanting to show my gratitude. And you couldn't do that in words. And so the way I tried to show that was entirely by what I did in the pitch. As I say, it didn't work very well because I got injured a lot. The kind of running gag was that I was made of glass. But I tried my best.
But it came back again and again, is what I wrote down in my notes. But it also, you've got starting power. Like, that sounds like there's a superpower there. Like, you just keep starting and keep starting.
And I suppose there's an element of ignorance to that as well. In that, even with anyone that probably was a bit more sensible and thought a bit more logically, was probably saying, there's something here, Will, that your body's not really made to do what you're doing. Whereas I ignorant was like, I'll be fine next time.
Be good.
Like, no problem. Yeah.
It's great stuff. Will, thank you so much, man, for joining us today. I tell you what, people are going to hear this and they're going to want to know how to connect with you, man. So like, where can people find you? Where can they go to connect with you?
Awesome. Well, firstly, I appreciate you having me on. It's, as your listeners can tell, I like to talk. So any opportunity to talk is more than welcome. So obviously, name is Will Fraser. I run a business called 101st. So 101st.com. Have a look at what we do. Contact details are on there. Find me on LinkedIn. All social platforms, all that good stuff. But yeah, 101st is the company. and Will Fraser is the name.
Great, man. Hey, well, and for our listeners, we will put it in the show notes. So if you're looking for a way to connect with Will, you can go ahead and look in the show notes and find Will Fraser there. Will, again, thanks so much. Dave, fun having you on, be the co-host today. So thanks for joining us today on the No Show Dogs podcast, and go out and make it a great today.